I was musing over my various writing projects, scripts, and ideas that by all rights I should be passionately working on. However, I have found it hard to write for periods longer than 90 minutes and must find another activity to break it up. And I found the same issue with reading for long periods of time. And I wondered why exactly this is. Why my brain is nagging me away from these activities which I do very much enjoy, but just don't stimulate me in a certain way. And after some thought, I came to the conclusion it must have been how I was living life previously for the majority of my years. My modus operandi, ever since being a small child, involved completing the required tasks at school in the most time-effective way possible, then going home and playing video games. I had a number of childhood friends, but then had to move in the 6th grade and was slow to make new friends, although I did get along with people well enough. Again, my lifestyle would repeat. In school, I was tasked with dispassionately writing dozens of essays, reading assigned books, and finishing math assignments in the fastest time I could, not wanting to think about any of the content contained in it. I wanted to absorb just the bare minimum of information, prep it for regurgitation onto the testing medium, and then forget it, so it can be replaced with new information. And once this task I had was completed, invariably, I would play a bunch of video games, pumping my brain with that feel-good juice. I had been playing computer or console games since I was 4 years old. Of course, through either my own impetus or my parents' suggestion, I had tried other activities, mostly a variety of athletics or summer camps, but I was only ever okay at them and didn't particularly enjoy participating in them. So after I got past that certain age in my life where I was no longer impressed into such activities, middle and high school would consist of finishing the assigned work and playing a bunch of video games. When reading books for class, I would sometimes enjoy them, but they were overwhelmingly trashy, like having to read multiple books about black people crying about 60s racism, or books that were basically romance porn for dumb broads, and I had no idea how they got into the curriculum. When I was younger, I would read for fun avidly. I devoured a whole slew of fiction of all stripes, well above my reading level, but as school forced me to read more, I began reading a lot less in my free time, and then not at all. So, by the time I got to college, both the acts of reading and writing were reduced to their most efficient parts, and I had filed them in my head under work activities, and my reward for work was always video games or other forms of media. I did other things during college, but overwhelmingly the life I had lived previously continued unabated. And so, despite enjoying the act of writing various things, which by all rights should be no more or less fun than thinking, but with some minor considerations to grammar and word choice, my brain had been trained by myself to not enjoy it for long periods and to bang it out extremely quickly, because it was a work activity. The same goes for reading. Before I could sit down with a good book or interesting article and really get engaged, but having to read and break down many boring technical economic articles or, God forbid, anthropology writings for class made me treat reading in the same way as writing. It is an activity that instinctually I do not associate with leisure, even though I did find it enjoyable long in the past. I think it will get better with time as I move away from having to read and write out of necessity, but the distortion is still frustrating. I think this is endemic to any schooling system that uses traditional methodology or does not engage in rigor for its tests. Teachers are starved for time and must teach a large variety of subjects over the year and only see the children for a small class or period per day. Therefore, they rely on assignments that they can give out and grade for feedback and improvement in a reasonable time frame. The expected intelligence of children and the average the teacher must teach for is fairly low. Therefore, a truly rigorous assignment that requires comprehension and not memorization is unlikely. Although not necessarily the case, the kids growing up in such a system will stop engaging with the learning material and move to effective memorization tactics. While this isn't all bad, being able to memorize and parse complex information does give some capability in the workplace and other tasks, but overwhelmingly, competence and understanding fades quickly for kids who use this system. If I had to seriously think about it, there is only a handful of college tests I've taken, all in the economics department, that truly needed comprehension of a variety of concepts and their intersections to pass. For example, in addition to knowing the calculus in relation to a given theory, one also had to know how these theories interacted in the space of a marketplace and be careful to keep all the rules associated with modeling a market in place. If one was modeling taxes, for example, you had to understand the state of the market fully, in addition to how the taxes will distort the market. You had to know the math for the original market, the taxed market, and the combined outcome. For the rest of subjects, including political science, the other thing I bothered to get a piece of paper for, one could pass with simple memorization and nothing else. It required almost next to no effort for the person studying it, Simply reading about basic gestalts of philosophy, history, or political systems and regurgitating them into a readable essay with low standards for prose. In light of this, I find remarkable that the factory school system managed to warp how I enjoy reading and writing, waste dozens of years of my life, and not be able to accommodate actual mentorship and learning because of the period-based, factory-style learning system that destroys opportunity to truly learn out of practical constraints. Even the best teachers I had would struggle to engage and challenge their audience to not memorize and discard information. This is not to say the education system produced nothing of value. Of course, through years of repetition, my writing and math skills are well practiced, and a large slew of information about history, literature, and the world was learned. Of course, through the stupid lens of a corporate-sponsored and government-ran system, but information nonetheless. However, one should not understate the effects of such institutions and activities on your psyche and behavior, and should look to mitigate and avoid such influences when possible. It is true enough that you as an individual can change your own utility function, your own assignments of enjoyment and importance to things, but it takes time and effort to change habits that make up your being. Hopefully you haven't developed habits that are too bad and can fix them without much trouble. As per what a utility function is, it is a theoretical math equation used in economics to denote how much enjoyment or use someone receives from a given activity. With enough complexity to such a calculus, one could fairly accurately model the behavior of an individual person. However, because people's tastes and preferences can constantly change, and a person's true preference is hard to decipher through surveys, it is difficult to use these models. Practically, they are reserved to being a model working in the background of markets, simplifying the actions of consumers to a reasonable equation. Beep. One interesting way to use a utility function is a labor-leisure optimization. People receive some amount of utility for an hour of leisure, as well as the money made from an hour of labor. If one has an hourly wage, it is much easier to calculate this sort of exchange. Obviously, at the extremes, an overworked person would value a single hour of leisure very much, and a person with no money would be happy receiving a small amount. These combine into a curve with diminishing returns and meet at a happy medium where the person's marginal utility of labor and marginal utility of leisure meet, the optimal work-life balance. The math of this equation is complicated somewhat if the person also enjoys their job because they receive a bit of leisure along with their labor. Obviously, receiving both money and leisure at once is a great feat, and we should endeavor to find such a situation where we truly enjoy work. However, all of these models and systems are underlaid by utilitarian and materialist worldviews. One could say the study of economics is only predictive in a world where everyone is a materialist utilitarian, and that economics is just applied utilitarianism with a splash of game theory. Useful for sure in a number of contexts related to making money in markets, but not a good moral guideline, philosophy for life, or sacred practice in any regard. But these were some nonsensical ruminations I was having. I will return with more of these at a later date.